Welcome. Myself, Darshini JS, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, Government Registered College, Kharpur, Bangalore. In this session, we will discuss what is public good, what are all the characteristics of public good, what are all the types of public good, difference between pure public good, impure public good, what are private goods, how they differ from public goods. Public goods are collective consumption goods or social goods. They possess two main characteristics like non-excludable and non-rival in nature. Non-excludable means once provided, it is difficult to exclude someone from consuming the good. Non-rival consumption of the good by one individual does not reduce the amount of availability of such good from consumption for others. Public goods are used to improve the social and economic welfare of the society as a whole. They are exclusively provided by the government. For example, national defense. The definition: the public goods are non-rival, non-excludable in nature. They can be made available cheaply among all consumers and remain indivisible. But once these goods are provided or made available to one individual, it is difficult to prevent or exclude others from consuming such good. Number of government services can be given as an example for public goods. A few examples are national defense, highway, public sanitization and water supply, public garden, research, scientific research, radio signals, beautiful gardens, and several. Then come to the characteristics of public goods. In order to call a good as a public good, what are all the characteristics or the features it need to involve? First one is non-excludable in nature. As I explained earlier, no one can be excluded from consuming such goods. Once provided, it is difficult to exclude others from consuming the good. Non-rival in consumption. Consumption by one individual is no way interrupted or disrupted by other people. Goods for which the marginal cost of its provision to an additional consumer is zero can be called as a non-rival. It can be interpreted as a non-rival in consumption. It is non-rival in consumption because consumption of a good by an individual does not prevent others from consuming such goods. Indivisibility. The total amount of public goods consumed by the same, it remains. The total amount of public goods consumed is the same for each individual. All consumers can get equal amount of benefit from public goods and it cannot be consumed in separate units. For example, utilization of highway and an airport. We can't divide these public goods. We cannot separate into different units. These goods are indivisible. So joint consumption. Collective consumption. Due to their nature of non-exclusion and non-rival nature, collective consumption is natural in the consumption of public goods. Zero marginal cost. The cost of production of additional resource remains zero. For example, if we assume 49 or 98, some number of people are utilizing the public garden. Suppose if one more person enter the public garden to make use of it, to utilize it. No external cost is involved in that. No need to bear the cost. So, due to this nature, the cost of production of additional resource remains zero. Free rider problem. Benefiting from the actions of others without paying for such benefits in the expectation that others will pay in collective consumption or production. For example, in a project work, some students they do the entire work, and some other students may not work and they escape from the work and they free ride on the efforts of the students who completed the work. We can commonly notice in the utilization of public good. This is one of the major problems. Government is the major provider of public goods. Government is the major provider of public goods since no price mechanism involved in the utilization of such goods. In general, the profit-making private firms show less interest or they may not involved in the production of such goods. Being a major provider of public goods, the government plays a very important role in production, supply, and the distribution of such goods. Externalities. Externalities are related with the characteristics of public goods. Externalities can be a positive, negative, or it may be a cost or a benefit to third person who is not involved in the market mechanism, is outside the market. So the characteristics of public good itself leads to externalities. So the positive externalities and public goods are closely linked. For example, public investment in education and public health involves positive spillover effect. In this, government can come up with health programs, some programs, and in that it can make use of vaccination. Means here the vaccination can prevent spillovers of ill health to others who come in contact. Here some people get vaccinated, so when they come in contact with some other people, those who are not even yet vaccinated, we can call it as a positive spillover effect. In spillover effect or third party effect, that's a very common thing in externalities. So without paying that, they are utilizing. It means the vaccinated people, they get benefited. The non-vaccinated people get benefited when they come in contact with vaccinated people. Here, it reduces the spread of contagious diseases. Market failure. As we discussed the concept of externalities, in that we discussed how the positive externality impact on others. Means it's a positive way. In a positive way, it helps others. If we come to the market failure concept, here the nature of public good itself have an adverse impact and it leads to misutilization or inefficient utilization of or inefficient allocation of resources, and it leads to market failure. The nature of public goods and the common natural resources itself the sources of inefficient allocation of resources, and it leads to market failure. In the absence of price mechanism, users underestimate the value of the available goods and services and overuse it. Such irrational use of resources results in inefficient allocation of resources. In this way, the nature of public good itself, the source of incorrect pricing and non-optimal level of production and consumption, and it finally leads to market failure. These are all the characteristics of public good, pure public good. So in this, if you look into this externality and market failure, their characteristics itself impact on the third person, or the person who is outside the market, and it may have a positive and negative impact on those people. In the same way, overutilization of resources, because their nature, they are common natural resources, they are public goods, and no price mechanism involved in that. In such situation, people understand the values of such available goods and overutilize and sometimes underutilize, and even they utilize without paying at the cost of others. That is free rider problem. So these are all the major characteristics of public goods. Then come to the next step, classification of public goods. Public goods can be classified mainly based on their characteristics, features, the nature. As we discussed earlier, there are two major characteristics. One is non-excludable and non-rival. Such goods can be categorized as pure public goods. National defense. No one can be excluded from defense, means whether the person lives in South India or North India, anywhere will be protected by the national army. Second category, non-excludable but rival. As we know, non-excludable means no one can be excluded from consuming and utilizing a good, but rival means consumption of good by one individual reduce the amount of availability of such good for others. For example, biodiversity, river. So excess utilization, as I told, these are the common natural resources, common access resources. Anyone can access, but overutilization may reduce its availability to some other people. Excess utilization of available common natural resources leads to depletion of and degradation of natural resources, and it may reduce its availability, or it may limit its availability, or it may reduce its quality for our future generation. Excess utilization. If you take in a forest, if human irrationally make use of that forest, it may have an adverse impact on animals and birds, those who are living in that forest. So it is rival in nature, but no one can be excluded from its utilization. But excess use by some people may have an adverse impact on some other people. That is the negative impact. Third one is excludable and non-rival in nature. For example, mixed goods. In this, university education. Excludable because limited seats are available in the university to get entry. But once they enter the university, teaching by the professors or teachers remains same for all the students. All students get benefited, equal benefit they get. Means the teaching is same teacher is teaching. So that is the characteristic of university education. So it is we can exclude students because of its limited availability of seats. But several people, once they enter means they get equal benefits. It's non-rival. And the final one is excludable and rival. Best example is private goods are the best examples. Excludable, anyone can be excluded from the utilization of such goods. In public goods, they are rival and excludable, means ability to pay matters. Example, food, clothing, house. So based on their ability, they can purchase and they own it. For example, these are all the here you can see some examples in this figure 3. Non-rival, non-excludable. Those goods are pure public goods. Example, national defense, street light, public sanitization. Second one is non-excludable but rival in nature, common natural resources. Example, river, atmosphere, forest, biodiversity, and several. Non-rival but excludable mixed goods are the best examples in this. Toll road, private parks, university education. If you look into this, the non-rival but excludable means toll road means those who pay the toll tax, toll fee, they are only allowed to make use of that road. But non-rival means we can't divide the excess that natural resource, the public good. So n number of people can make use of that road. In the same way, the private park also and university education, I already explained that one. So these are all the examples of mixed goods, non-rival but excludable. And the final one is rival and excludable pure private goods. So ability to pay, so based on their ability they can have it. So here the private market plays a very important role. The price mechanism is also plays a very important role in this. So in order to elaborate, means in order to explain some more, in order to give some more information, I try to explain the major two concepts. One is we can easily understand non-rival and non-excludable national defense. Anyone can make use of it and no one can be excluded, and it is not divisible. And in the case of private goods, excludable and rival, you can easily understand. Excluding those two concepts, the two categories, mainly the non-rival but excludable, and some are non-excludable but rival. These are very important things. So, in the first case of non-rival but excludable goods, in this case, it is possible to exclude some individuals from its consumption, but once included, consumption by an individual does not affect or limit the quantity of availability of such goods for others. So in this way, some goods are excludable but non-rival in nature. The best example already explained this: university education, toll roads, swimming pool and all. And come to the second one, non-excludable but rival. Some common natural resources are non-excludable but are rival in nature, as their consumption lessens the availability of such goods to others. The best example, as we know, earth, river and atmosphere, biosphere and all. As we discussed already, while explaining the concept of market failure, based on the nature of goods, market failure occurs. In this, we already discussed in the previous class. The two concepts, two factors come under the nature of goods. One is externalities and another one is public goods. Since we are discussing mainly on public goods, mainly and focus here how the public goods leads to market failure. The nature of public goods and the common natural resources, the nature itself causes and results in market failure. Here we can explain or consider the two concepts. One is tragedy of commons, another one is free rider problem. So overutilization or irrational use of resources involves the problem of tragedy of commons. The tragedy of commons refers to the absence of incentives to prevent the overuse of common resources that causes the depletion of such resources. For example, emission of greenhouse gases results in the depletion of ozone layers, which creates threat to the sustainable environment. It also has an adverse impact on human and even it limit the availability of common resources for our future generation. The second concept, free riders problem. So before getting into the problem or an example, we will discuss what is free riding. Free riding means benefiting from the actions of others without paying for the benefits. In this, consumers do not pay for non-excludable goods in the expectation that others will pay in collective consumption. Anyone can have access to such common goods, and it is really difficult to prevent or exclude others from consuming them. So we can understand the problem of free riding with few examples. First one is, as I already discussed, group project or a project. In project work, some students do the entire work and others do not involve in the work, and they free ride on the effort of other students who did the work. In another example, small bridge construction in a village. The people of village work together and construct a bridge that will benefit all. With many more efforts, they completed the task. But people from other village also make use of that bridge. So without paying, they make use of it. Here, some people are benefiting from the actions of others without paying for such benefits in the expectation that others will pay in collective consumption or production. These are the major two problems we come across in public goods. How the nature of public goods itself leads to inefficient allocation of resources, irrational use of resources, and finally leads to market failure. So connecting to the example of free rider problem, the tragedy of commons occurs due to overconsumption or overutilization of shared resources and common natural goods. In the above two examples, some people may overuse the bridge and free ride on others' effort, those who are involved in the construction of bridge. Like this, more often the nature of public goods itself results in market failure. So as we discussed already several times, I already explained, since The public goods itself, the sources of market failure, and no price mechanism involved in the utilization of such public goods. Government is the main major provider of such goods. In the absence of such price mechanism, users underestimate the value of such goods and involve in the overconsumption. And such self-interested behaviors of consumers results in the degradation and depletion of natural resources. Such consequences will have an adverse impact on environment and finally on the sustainable development. It cannot be attained or even retained considering the future generation. Such irrational use of resources or the public goods results in inefficient allocation of resources. In this way, the nature of public goods itself, the source of incorrect pricing and non-optimum level of production and consumption, and finally it end up with market failure. So if you look into this, why applicability of free riding and tragedy of commons? Why it happens? Because no price mechanism is involved. Goods are rival but non-excludable in nature. Anyone can use without paying, free of cost. They can utilize, and no incentives are provided for a rational use or even for the rational use of goods. And private markets underproduce the public goods several times because no price mechanism involved in that, and problem of free rider problems exist in that, and no profit making firms involved in the production because they show less interest because of improper price mechanism. And several times such public goods are underproduced, undersupplied, and government several times it fails to provide sufficient level of goods to the market. The best example is the COVID-19 we are facing nowadays. Vaccination problems, so many problems we are facing. There are so many restrictions in that, so many constructions in that. And finally, users understate the value of such goods and services. Then, why the government is the major provider of such public goods? Then the question arises, why government plays a very important role in providing public goods? Reasons follows because of several reasons. Government remain as a major provider of public goods several times. Even with private interference in recent years, in the provision of public goods, pure public goods and impure public goods and quasi public goods, several types, mainly based on their non-rival, non-excludable, rival, excludable, non-rival, excludable. So based on that, the nature, we bifurcate the public goods into several categories. So in such a situation, in some areas, government play a very important role in providing such goods. But in some cases, in some government, both the private and the government also playing a very important role as a partners and as a facilitator. Government is playing a role. The public goods are collective consumption goods and social goods. They are social and collective consumption goods in nature. And the main intention of the private sector is to profit maximization, so that prevents several times to enter into this sector. And why the government provide means public goods enhance the maximum welfare of the society. So social welfare is the prime aim of the government. So it involves in the provision of public goods. And more often, several times the private sector provide public goods, but several times it undersupply the goods. And price mechanism is not involved in the production and consumption of such goods. And the free rider problem. involved in the consumption of such goods. And several times, due to such reasons, the private hesitate or may not involve. If they enter, they undersupply the goods in several times. Even though in recent years, both the government as well as private playing very important role. In spite of that, we say government is playing a very crucial role in providing some public goods. So far, we discussed the public goods. Next, we will move towards impure public goods. Impure public goods possess some characteristics of both public and private goods. They are rival in nature and are even often excludable. Such nature can reduce the free riders problem in the use of goods and services. Best example, swimming pool and roads and some other. And a third concept is quasi public goods or mixed goods. These goods are also called near public goods. These goods possess all the characteristics of private goods and some characteristics of public goods. Example, education and health services. Several times, ability to pay matters in the provision or utilization of these goods because of the entry of both the public and involvement of both the public and private sector. Public goods, public sector, public schools, private education centers, public educational centers, public health centers, private hospitals. So here the government both as a facilitator and the partner as playing its role. Both are playing their own role in this, in the providing these goods. Next concept, merit goods. Merit goods are socially desirable goods. Such goods can be underproduced, underconsumed through the market mechanism. Due to the inadequate supply of goods, maximum social benefit may not be attained. These goods are rival and excludable in nature, but socially desirable. In this, the provision of merit goods, both the private and as well as both the private and public sector are the providers of such goods. They play a very important role, but more often, government intervention is preferable to maintain equity in the distribution of resources. These merit goods are very much essential. They are socially desirable goods. Since they are socially desirable, more government intervention is preferred most often. So, mainly why the government intervention is preferred more often is because to control adverse effects of information failure, imperfect information or that which may leads to market failure, that one, and uncertainties involved in the provision of such goods several times. So in order to control that, government intervention is preferred and maintain equality in the distribution. So along with the growth, in order to have a social justice, equality need to be maintained. So for these reasons, government intervention is more preferred while providing the public goods. Then what are the characteristics of merit goods? They are excludable in nature. I mean, people can easily exclude it from its consumption mainly based on the ability to pay. Rival in consumption. The consumption of good by one individual prevent other individual from consuming such goods. Third one, increasing marginal cost. Additional cost is involved in the production of such each unit of additional goods. So, the cost of production of additional resource not remain zero. Positive externalities. Positive externalities are already commonly involved in the consumption of merit goods. I already explained this concept. I am not going in depth of this now. Public, both the government and private play an important role in the provision of these goods. We know that, as I told already, in the provision of health and education, in both the sectors, both the public and as well as the private sectors, playing very important role. And another type of good, demerit goods. Demerit goods are socially undesirable goods. They are harmful to the society and they minimize the social benefit of society as a whole. So the government always wants to check on the use of such goods and services to maximize the benefit of the society. Example, cigarette, drugs, alcohol, and several. What are the characteristics of such demerit goods? Negative externality. Negative externalities involved in the use of such demerit goods, since the consumption of such goods may affect others or the entire society as a whole. So even not even compensated for that loss. But however, some goods may cause negative externalities, but they need not to be demerit goods. The best example is steel plant. Steel plant dumping its waste into a river, it is negative externality. It may impact on fishermen downstream, as we discussed in the case of externalities. As a case of externalities, negative production externalities, a best example in that. But steel production is not a demerit good. Steel is not demerit, it's not a demerit good. So in this way, if we consider such one activity as a negative externality, it may not need to be a demerit good. Some exceptional cases are there. And private goods is lesser than social cost. Here the private cost is lesser, remains lesser than social cost in the case of demerit goods. So in the case of demerit goods, the private cost lies below than the social cost due to the non-exclusion of indirect cost on the third party. And marginal external cost remains higher than the market prices. So here the marginal external cost is upward sloping. Here with more and more adverse impact caused with the production or the consumption of such goods. The marginal external cost to the third party or the people in the society adversely affected, and private in nature. So they are provided by anyone, like when the market itself they can get costlier. In order to control the utilization, government imposes tax just to control the consumption of such goods. The best example is what is the price of cigarettes and alcohol and all. Of course, at some extent benefit the government, even though we can see the label harmful to health. Not excluded in social cost. Here, as I discussed, the difference between the private cost and social cost. The difference is nothing but the external cost. We can't say that's a social cost because it harms the people. The example is the price of the cigarette packs. Cost incurred by the user of demerit goods is not considered as a social cost to the society. And finally, the private goods. As I already discussed, these goods are rival and excludable in nature. Additional cost is involved in the provision of extra unit of good. They are produced by private people, private manufacturers. While providing the private goods, market operates under two principles. One is exclusion principle and revealed principle. What are all the characteristics? As already discussed, excludable in nature, mainly based on the ability to pay. People can make use of it, have it. And second one is rival in consumption. Consumption of good by one individual prevents the consumption by another individual. In this case, divisibility. each individual cannot consume same amount of goods. No collective consumption. Due to its rival nature, collective consumption is impossible. Increasing marginal cost. So cost of production of additional resource increases. Additional cost is involved in the production of each unit of additional good. And revealed preference. People have to pay in order to buy such goods in the market. Those who do not pay are excluded from the consumption. The market price mechanism is the signal for the producers to meet the market demands. So here, the consumers reveal their preference through effective demand and market price. These revealed preferences are the signals for the producers to produce goods as per the market demand. And finally, last one is no free rider problem is involved. So people willingness to pay and use such goods and services results in solving the problem of free riding. So far we discussed public good is public good, what are its characteristics, what are the types, and how the public good differ from pure public good differ from impure public good, how public good differs from the private good, how we can differentiate the merit and demerit good. So to conclude, public goods are used to improve or enhance the social economic welfare of the society as a whole. They are non-rival, non-excludable in nature. All users can be included. No one can be excluded from that. They can be made available to each and everyone, whereas the private goods possess the nature of rival, excludable nature. They are rival and excludable in nature. So that the nature of good itself causes and results in market failure and maximizing the social welfare of society. So with this, I will conclude this session, today's session. I will conclude this session. Thank you.